Hello, my friends. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to Mystery Monday, where we're diamond painting a mystery canvas kit and I tell you about a real life mystery. This week, we're going to be talking about Mothman. And I love the story of Mothman because I feel like there are multiple mysteries involved in Mothman. If you've never heard about Mothman before, let me give you a really brief rundown and then we'll get into more of the details. So, Mothman is a cryptid, and a cryptid is a folklore creature, kind of like Sasquatch or the Loch Ness Monster. And Mothman originated in the 1960s in a small town called Point Pleasant in West Virginia. He is a humanoid creature. He's described as being 7 foot tall with giant wings and red glowing eyes. He was said to have been seen at an old abandoned munitions factory that was operational during World War II. The factory had been shut down right at the end of World War II and was no longer being used, or it was just completely abandoned. And following the initial sighting of the Mothman, a lot of other people started to see him. For about 13 months, there were a lot of reports of people seeing the Mothman. And it all kind of culminated when there was a really tragic incident in which the Silver Bridge collapsed. And the Silver Bridge was the bridge that connected Ohio and West Virginia over the Ohio River. Now, the bridge collapsed, and sadly, a lot of people actually were injured and died when their cars fell off of the bridge into the river. And there are a lot of people that kind of connected the Mothman to this bridge collapse. People say that they saw the Mothman on the bridge days leading up to the collapse. Now, some people say that the Mothman was a harbinger of death and destruction, and other people say that the Mothman came to us to warn people of what was going to happen. So there's kind of a lot of mystery involved in the Mothman. For one, is he real or is he not real? What is he? Is he really a Mothman? And is he good or is he bad? Some people say he is, like the angel of death. Some people say he's a guardian angel. And so there's a lot of components to Mothman that are mysterious. So let's dive into Mothman and what happened and what's going on today with Mothman. So on November 15th, 1966, there were 2 young couples in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, who saw the Mothman. They were out on this road and they were driving around what they called the TNT area. So this was the former World War II munitions plant. And they were out there for a drive, and they said they came across this really tall, slender, muscular man. They described him as being about 7 feet tall with white wings, and they all said he had these really bright red glowing eyes. So the first couple, Roger and Linda Scarberry, they came across him, and when the lights shone on him, he kind of scurried away, but then they got scared and they tried to drive away, and that's when they said that the Mothman started chasing their car, and they started heading back into town to get away from him, and they said they couldn't shake him. No matter how fast they drove, the Mothman could keep up with them, even when they were going 100 miles an hour. Now, the other couple, Steve and Mary Millette, they also saw the creature, and they gave the same account. They described the same thing. This really tall man with big wings and glowing eyes. So they went back to the town, and they told everybody what they had seen, and they actually put it in the newspaper. And the newspaper article was kind of amusing. It said, "Couples see man-sized bird, creature, something." And of course, this kind of whipped this small town up into a frenzy because people were scared. They didn't know what this was. And, in the months following this, a lot of people said that they saw the same thing. Now, many people believe that they saw Mothman. Other people think that it was something else that they were seeing. There was one professor that really thought that this was a sandhill crane that people were seeing. Now, a sandhill crane is a really large bird. They're about 3 to 4 foot tall. They have a wingspan of about 6 feet, and they have red markings around their eyes, which could be what the couples were referring to when they said they saw these red eyes. And when you look at the migratory patterns of these birds, it is possible that these birds could have been passing through that area. Now, other people think that it could have been owls. Owls are known for having red glowing eyes because of the vasculature in the eyes, and especially barred owls who live in big open forests. So this munitions plant that was out in the middle of West Virginia is in a wooded area, and it's now abandoned and overgrown, and there would be lots of places for owls to hide and live in there. And so a lot of people thought that it was probably just birds that these people saw. Now, other people claim that there's no way it could have been birds because this thing that people were seeing was very human-like. They said it had arms and legs, and it was like a man. Now, there was lots of articles, and at that time, Batman was also popular. And so one article in particular had dubbed this creature the Mothman. And so a lot of people attribute the Mothman name to that article. And at that time, because Batman was so popular, it kind of seems like the origin of Mothman was really born out of that. Now, another explanation for all of the sightings was mass hysteria. And mass hysteria is an actual concept. It's a real thing. And so it could have been that people heard this story and then they all started to get whipped up into a frenzy. And then it was like everybody in the town either had a sighting of their own or knew somebody that did. And so it kind of called into question, are people really seeing this? Or is it just kind of this mass hysteria where people think that they're seeing the Mothman, but they're not really seeing it? So like I was saying, this all started in 1966, and it kind of culminated in 1967 when the Silver Bridge collapsed. And some people actually blamed the collapse on Mothman. And it seemed like after that collapse happened, people stopped talking about Mothman. They really just didn't want to hear it anymore. I think people were sick of hearing about it and sick of talking about it. This really bad thing happened, and I think people just wanted to stop hearing about this nonsense of Mothman. And so for a while, Mothman kind of lay dormant. They didn't really talk about Mothman anymore. The sightings seemed to slow down, and nothing really happened. The legend of Mothman really kind of died down until 1970, when Gray Barker wrote a book called The Silver Bridge, The Classic Mothman Tale, and that was in 1970. Now, in 1975, another book came out by John Keel, and it was called The Mothman Prophecies. So, John Keel's book it was about his investigations into these sightings of the Mothman, and it also had a lot of different theories about UFOs and just different supernatural phenomena, and it all connected it again to the Silver Bridge across the Ohio River and the collapse. And it's important to note, though, that after official investigations about the bridge, it was determined that it was stress corrosion that caused this eye bar in the suspension of the bridge to break, and that is actually what caused the bridge to collapse. So we don't have any definitive proof that it was, the Mothman that did it. So anyway, John Keel wrote this book called The Mothman Prophecies. Now, the Mothman Prophecies ultimately was the inspiration for a film that was made in 2002 starring Richard Gere called the same thing, The Mothman Prophecies. Now, there have been other reports of Mothman being seen at the time or around other tragic events. For example, there are reports of the Mothman being seen around the time of some fires that happened at some Russian apartments. There were reports of him being around Chernobyl, and there were reports also of him being around 9/11. And again, it calls into question, is he a harbinger of death and destruction? Or does he come to us as a warning? Is he a guardian angel that is coming to warn people of these tragic events? Now, after the 2002 movie with Richard Gere, it really did bring a lot more awareness of Mothman on a global scale. And people started directing their attention to this tiny little town, Point Pleasant, in West Virginia. And they actually built a statue that is still there today of Mothman. And people started going there to visit because they wanted to see where it all started at this TNT area in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And so the town now has festivals to celebrate Mothman. And it's kind of a nice way for the town to celebrate their little piece of modern folklore and for them, quite frankly, to attract tourism. So interestingly, they do have that munitions site, which is now, it's decommissioned, but it was donated to the Department of Natural Resources, and some of the buildings are still there. And I did see one video, I'll link it down below, where they went and toured the buildings, and there's all these abandoned bunkers and factory buildings, and it's very creepy, but it does seem like the kind of place that a Mothman would like to live. And in the town itself, that as I was saying, they still have that statue and they have some artwork there for Mothman. And they have these festivals, and it brings in about 10 to 12,000 people, and it does bring in quite a bit of revenue for the town, which is nice. And they also have a Mothman museum there, which is run by one of the townspeople whose father was really actively involved in looking into and researching the Mothman mysteries. And it seems like the town has kind of embraced and accepted this. Although they might not believe in Mothman, they have, come to accept that Mothman is a part of their history and is a part of their folklore. In 2019, there was a surge of sightings in Chicago, of all places, and there's a lot of people saying that they were seeing Mothman, and they actually dubbed him Chicago's Mothman. And a lot of people had reported lots of different sightings of Mothman, including at O'Hare Airport, and I'm kind of laughing because a lot of these sightings actually sounded like potentially somebody in a Halloween costume that was playing a prank, but it is worth mentioning because it was in the newspapers and things like that, and people were talking about it, and it was very sensational. I'll read one of the events to you. This was one of the reportings. It says, I was at the airport picking up a load at Nippon. I was already backed into the dock and was standing away from the truck smoking a cigarette while they loaded my truck. I was looking towards the runways in the direction of the tunnel, and that is when I noticed something that looked like a large bird standing just outside the fence by the parking lot. It was not hard to miss because 2 street lamps were nearby. It looked like a person with wings that were stretched out and flapping. It was walking away from the fence towards the open field, and then it began to flap its wings and disappeared. So that was kind of interesting. That was in 2019, and there was a whole bunch of sightings during that time, and people were very excited about it, and there was lots of blog posts and articles about Chicago's Mothman at that time. And I don't know about this one. I do find it fascinating that so many people had this sighting and can agree on what he looked like and how he acted, and he had these red glowing eyes. I do think that there are other possible explanations, like the birds, for example, that they looked like these sandhill cranes. I do think that the mass hysteria can be a thing where, everybody's kind of whipped up into a frenzy and then they start thinking that they're seeing things. There are other parts of the story, though, that are really interesting. There were reports that Mothman had been landing on cars of teenagers that were out in the woods parked, and that there were claw marks on top of the cars that were seen. And, there's just so many different weird things that happened. I don't know. He could be out there. And if he is out there, I hope that he is out there to warn us of possibly dangerous things rather than being a harbinger of death and destruction, as some people have said. I would like to believe that he's out there doing good and not doing harm. So let me know what you think about Mothman. Have you heard about him before? This was kind of a newer story to me. I've definitely heard of him before, but I had never looked into it until I started doing some research for this week's episode. And I really kind of like it because this is a great example of modern American folklore. And I feel like in America, we don't have that much folklore like this, like other countries do. And so, I don't know, I just feel like it's so interesting. I kind of hope he's out there, and I hope he's looking out for us. So let me know what you thought, and I'll pop back over to our canvas, and we'll take a look at how we're doing on our mystery canvas. Okay, so we've got our section done for this week. It's looking pretty good. We've got part of his hat done here, and it's looking so sparkly. It's almost blinding. So it's looking pretty good. I'm curious to see what this gnome looks like over here. I'm just curious to see what colors his hat are going to be. And I'm curious to see what's up in this section over here. So yeah, we're just gonna keep plugging away on it. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought about Mothman. Let me know what you think about the diamond painting so far. If you enjoyed, please think about giving me a thumbs up on the video. I would appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!